Good afternoon, 104. This is an introduction to a new chord, and this is for the week of April 27th. So for the week of April 27th, you should be working on page 109, 110, and 111. So I'm going to split this into two videos. The first video, I'm going to introduce you to this new 5 chord, explain where it's coming from and how to play it. And then I want you to experiment with your left hand and see if you can find a 1 and 5 chord in all the different keys. Once you've mastered that, once you feel comfortable, then it's time to move on to the second video where I'll explain how to use this chord with the pieces that you're being assigned on 109, 110, and 111. So with the chord on page 109, let's start by backing up and talking about a chord. So a chord is when you've got those 3 notes all stacked up in thirds, and we've seen some chords in our pieces many times up until this point. And it always looked like this. We said that a chord, a definition of a chord, is when you're playing 3 or more notes all together. We have always seen our chords stacking up in intervals of thirds. So we were using fingers 5, 3, 1. If you recall, when we were talking about naming the bottom of that chord, naming it, it's the bottom of that chord that is going to give it that name. So if I was looking at my chord that I've got on my whiteboard, that second space is giving you C. So we were calling this a C chord. We found G chords, D chords, we found various chords in our literature that we've been playing up until this point. We're going to talk about adding another chord. So this is the most common chord that we have in our music, a root position chord, C chord in this case, but we have another way of identifying it in music, and that's by using Roman numerals. When we use Roman numerals to identify our chords in our music, the Roman numeral is coming from where the root or the bottom of that chord is in the hand position. So if I'm in the key of C, like I am with this chord here, C is the first note of that hand position, so this could also be identified as a 1 chord. We're always going to use an uppercase Roman numeral. That's saying that we're in a major 5-finger position, which is what we've been doing now. Come next week, we'll add some minor into that. So our 1 chord is the most commonly used chord. We've seen it a lot at the end of pieces, and you may have remembered too that most of the time it's in the left hand. So these chords that we're going to be working on today, we are just going to be doing it in our left hand, because usually you're going to have melody in your right hand and that harmony or supporting chords in your left hand. So there's our 1 chord that we're used to. If I'm in C position, it's that bottom, middle, top. All right, so now on page 109, they're introducing you to another chord. They're calling it a dominant chord. So my 1 chord can also be called a tonic chord because that root, or the 1, is tonic. Dominant means 5. And so the second most frequently used chord in our music would be a 5 chord. If it's a 5 chord, that means that the root of it would be the 5th note of my hand position. So in the key of C, that means my root is going to be G. If I stack it up, I have a B in the middle, and I'm going to have a D at the top. So this could be called my 5 chord. If I wanted to identify it by letter name, I would identify it as a G chord, because G is that lowest note, G is that root. If I wanted to call it by a name, I could call it a dominant chord, because G is that 5th or that dominant scale degree. Chords are movable. So if we're sitting in the key of F, F would be a 1 chord or a tonic chord. The 5th note of an F pattern, C in that case would be a 5 or a dominant chord. When you're going between a 1 chord and a 5 chord, I'm going in the key of G right now, you can see that it's a little awkward. It's a long way to travel. So what we're going to do is that we're going to put this chord in an inversion. If you put a chord in an inversion, it means that you're going to change around the order of the notes so that it's easier to play. I'm not changing the letter names because that would change the type of chord I have. I'm just changing the order of how I'm playing them. Before we do that, there's one more thing we're going to do with this 5 chord. We're going to add an extra note in there. We're going to add an extra scale degree. In our country, in the 20th century, jazz was a big influence in our pop culture, in our classical music, and how we heard chords. And so instead of just hearing a 5 chord, in our world, we're used to hearing 5/7 chords, which is an extra note of a 7th there. So we are going to add that note to it. So what's going to happen with my G chord is, here's what's going to happen with the inversion. I'm going to take this B that right now is in the middle, and I'm going to put it on the bottom. I'm going to take that extra note that I just added, which is an F, and I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to take my G, which was the bottom or the root, and it's now going to become the top. So we'll get rid of these top 2 notes. And there's the inversion, or the way I'm going to play my 5/7 chord. Look at my hand on the piano. Here's my 1, and now instead of moving all the way up here to get my 5, by putting it in inversion, do you see how my hand barely had to move? Here's the most important thing that I want you to remember. Memorize how your hand moves between a 1 and a 5/7 chord. Because then if you've memorized that movement, you'll be able to find it very easily in any tonic or any hand position. So looking at my board, moving from a 1, and we turn this into a 5/7 chord with that extra jazz tone there. So we're gonna put a little 7 there. Moving from my 1 to my 5/7, here's what I want you to remember. I would go in your book on page 109. You've got this exact pattern written out here on the second paragraph of examples. And draw in for yourself, or write this information. The thumb stays on the exact same note that was the top of your 1 chord. The middle note is going to be finger 2. And it's finger 2 on whatever note finger 2 spells when you line up tonic, whole, whole, half, whole. It's really important to spell your major 5-finger pattern first. That way you'll be sure to see if finger 2 would be on an accidental or not. So thumb stays, 2 plays. The bottom note is that 5th finger reaching down a half a step. Half a step, remember, means that it's going to the very next key. And take a look there, because again, it might be a white key, it might be a black key. Make sure you look at what a half step is. So to put my hand, if I have eyes on a piano here so you can see, my 1 chord would be bottom, middle, top. To get to my 5/7 chord, thumb stays, the middle switches to finger 2 on the same note that would be in the 5-finger pattern, and my 5th finger drops down half a step. So let's take our left hand. I'm going to go higher here. I think I will go here just so you can see my hand. Let's build a C major position. Tonic, whole, whole, half, whole. So my 1 chord is going to be fingers 5, 3, and 1, or bottom, middle, top. Now to play my new 5/7 chord, work from the top of your hand. Thumb stays. Finger 3 is going to get replaced with the note that finger 2 played in the 5-finger position. So it's a neighbor to it. My 5th finger is going to go down half a step, which in this case takes me to my white key. There is your new 5/7 chord when I'm in a C position. Let's practice going back and forth. 1, 5/7, 1. And I would practice going back and forth until you can do it fluidly. Let's try a different key. What if we were playing in the key of G? Tonic, whole, whole, half, whole. Okay, so let's find our 1 chord. Bottom, middle, top. To find my new 5 chord, work from the top of your hand. Thumb stays. 2 plays, which it was on a C when I found my hand position. Look at your 5th finger. If it's going to drop half a step, is it going to black or white? It's going to black. There's that 5/7 chord. So if you are doing your assignments in a written fashion, you might want to look at where you've got a paper keyboard or pull up a keyboard on your phone that you can look at so that you can see if that bottom finger is going down half a step. If it's a black key, you're going to need to make sure that you write an accidental in there when you're writing it out. So your first assignment for this week is to take your left hand and see if you can find all 12 tonics, followed by a 1 chord, and then this new 5/7. You only need to do it with your left hand. We're only going to be using it for left hand in an accompaniment pattern, which is traditionally how it's found. So we did C and G. You could continue working around the circle of fifths and build D and then A and then E. If you have a keyboard that's got enough room, you could start with C down at the bottom and work your way up. But your first assignment is to take your left hand, find all 12 tonics, build the pattern, play a 1 chord, and then a 5/7. Let's do one more together before you leave me. Let's try F. So let's find an F, again with our left hand. Let's build the pattern, tonic, whole, whole, half, whole. My 1 chord is bottom, middle, top. To find my new 5/7 chord, work from the top of your hand. Thumb stays, 2 plays, 5th finger down a half a step. There would be my 5/7 chord. And again, practice going back and forth between the two. As always, if you're having a hard time with these 5/7 chords, whether it's coordination or figuring out what notes you need, or just how this is relating to the 1 chord, please reach out. I'd be happy to do a little mini lesson with you through FaceTime or Zoom. Otherwise, I hope this is a good enough explanation for you to be able to take that left hand now, work through all 12 tonics, finish finding 1 and 5/7 in each of those keys. Practice doing that with your left hand. When you're feeling good and consistent about it, then it's time to move on to the next video, which is going to tell you or show you how to incorporate that into some pieces.